Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
There's something deeply humiliating about watching someone raise a glass to your failure while wearing a $50 rental suit from a strip mall and pretending it's a goddamn TED Talk. I hadn't seen Robbie in almost 20 years, and the first words out of his mouth as he stood up with his greasy grin and his glass of bargain Prosecco were, "Here's to those who peaked in high school." The room erupted with laughter, tight, polite, self-congratulatory laughter that made my teeth itch. I didn't laugh. Neither did Alana. She leaned over slowly, like she was trying not to wrinkle her $1,000 leather jacket against the sticky folding chair, and whispered in my ear, "Want me to tell them you're headlining Coachella next spring?" She said it with just enough dryness that it could have passed as a joke, but her eyes were already scanning the room for who needed reminding. "No," I muttered, not because I didn't want her to, but because I wanted it too much. We were in the community center gym, the same one where they used to hold the junior prom and the blood drives. Someone had strung up gold and black streamers and plugged in a playlist called 90s and Naughty Spangers. They even had a banner, hand-painted, curling at the edges, "Class of 2005, still alive." It smelled like Lysol and hot dogs, and the wine tasted like cherry cough syrup. I sat near the back, in a corner where the lights flickered every few minutes. I'd come in late on purpose, hoping to blend in, hoping no one would recognize me now that I was 38, leaner, sharper, older than I'd ever expected to be. I wore black, always black. When in doubt, dress like the ghost of the guy they forgot. Robbie didn't forget. He spotted me the second I walked in. That golden boy smirk twisted his lips as he held up his glass like some kind of parody of an old war buddy who thought I'd died in the trenches. "Nathaniel Carter," he'd called out across the room. "Well, I'll be damned. You survived LA, huh?" Survived. That was the word he used. As if I'd barely crawled out of some smoking crater, still bleeding and twitching from the wreckage of a failed dream. I nodded once and found my seat. No one else said my name after that. Some people looked. A couple whispered. Jenny Thomas. Yes, that Jenny caught my eye from across the buffet line, but her face didn't move. She looked at me like she was trying to remember a lyric she used to know. So when Robbie made that toast, it was personal. "To those who peaked in high school," he said again, louder now. Because God knows it's all been downhill since then. Another roar of laughter. People clinking glasses. Someone, probably Heather Burns, let out a shriek laugh that echoed off the walls. And still, I didn't move. The thing is, he was right. Most of them had peaked in high school. They got their football rings, their cheerleader kisses, their 3 lines in the yearbook and 2 semesters in community college before life hit the brakes and told them, "That's it, bud. Hope you enjoyed the show." I, on the other hand, hadn't even started the climb until my 20s. Hell, I was practically mute in high school. The only reason anyone remembered me was because of the Jenny thing. And even that story was so warped and twisted by gossip it might as well have been written by Stephen King on a bad acid trip. Alana knew the truth. She also knew how to keep her mouth shut when it mattered. She looked at me now, eyes calculating, jaw tight. She hated being in places like this, places full of normal people pretending they were still 17 and golden. She whispered again, softer this time. "You want out?" I shook my head. Not yet. Because something in me had shifted the moment Robbie said those words. "To those who peaked in high school." It echoed like a gunshot in my chest. You know the funny thing about revenge? Sometimes, you don't even know you've been planning it for decades. The truth is, I didn't come here for nostalgia. I came to watch the collapse. I came because I needed to see with my own eyes whether the people who broke me had broken themselves in the process. Whether they ever thought about it. Whether they even remembered. Some of them would look at me tonight and feel nothing. Others would feel something and not know why. And maybe, just maybe, 1 or 2 of them would see me for who I really was. Not the freak with the bass guitar who skipped prom. Not the kid whose locker got covered in post-it notes that said mute and loser and worse. Not Jenny's secret shame or Robbie's weird little cousin. I wanted to see if anyone in this room could recognize the man I'd become before I made sure they'd never forget it. So I leaned back in my chair, swirling the wine in my cup, and smiled the way wolves smile when they're waiting for the sheep to notice the open gate. I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here to remember. It's funny how people think memory is a scrapbook you flip through at will, like you can choose to see the good pages and skip the ones stained with regret or humiliation. But for me, high school isn't a collection of moments, it's a long, flickering fever dream I keep waking up from in cold sweats. Back then, I wasn't invisible because no one saw me, I was invisible because nobody wanted to see me. I walked through those beige-tiled hallways like a shadow with a schedule, headphones in, hood up, trying not to exist too loud. People remember Robbie as the hometown hero, the all-American kid with the varsity jacket and the loud laugh that made teachers give him second chances they never gave to kids like me. He was the cousin my mom always compared me to, even if she pretended she didn't. You should get outside more, like Robbie, she'd say, while I sat in the garage with my beat-up bass, running my fingers over 4 strings that felt more like home than any room in that damn house. I wasn't good at small talk or parties or pretending to like things I didn't. What I was good at, what I lived for, was music. That was the only thing that ever made sense. I'd hole up in the back of the school auditorium during lunch, not even pretending to eat, just scribbling lyrics on napkins and tapping rhythms into my thighs until the bell saved me. That garage I mentioned? That was the stage I never got. That's where the real me lived, plugged in, loud, raw. And for one brief moment, I wasn't just Nate Carter, the weird kid with the pale skin and the quiet voice. I was something else, something more. But even then, there was Jenny. Jenny Thomas. Blonde. Sharp-eyed. Always wearing those oversized sweaters like she was trying to hide how pretty she was. She wasn't a cheerleader or a loner. She was somewhere in between, the kind of girl who floated between groups like smoke through doorways. One day she sat next to me in bio class and said, without looking up from her notes, "You look like a tax accountant trapped in a teenager's body." And somehow, that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. We didn't date, not in the way kids around here dated. No corsages, no homecoming dances, no loud declarations in the hallway. We met behind the auditorium after school, trading mixtapes and secrets, kissing like we were afraid the walls might gossip. She said she liked my voice, that it made her feel calm. I told her she made me feel like I didn't have to apologize for being quiet. We were young, we were idiots, we thought that was enough to protect us. Then prom happened. God, I still taste the bile from that night. I wasn't even supposed to go. I didn't buy a tux, didn't care about the theme, didn't give a damn who got crowned king or queen. But Jenny had asked me nervously, shyly, like she wasn't sure I'd say yes, and against every instinct I had, I did. I showed up in a wrinkled blazer and sneakers, clutching a corsage I bought from a gas station. She looked unreal. Not like a movie star, not like a princess, but like someone who tried for me. And I wish I could say the night went well, that we danced and kissed under glittering lights like some teen drama, but that would be a lie. Because halfway through the night, something changed. Robbie saw us. He walked up to me like we were equals, threw his arm around my shoulder like we were buddies, and said, loud enough for half the gym to hear, "Didn't think nerds like you got the pretty girls. Must be slumming it, huh, Jenny?" She laughed. Not a big laugh. Not a cruel one. Just a small, nervous chuckle. But it was enough. It was enough to hollow me out. I left before midnight and never talked to her again. The next week, the entire school knew what we did behind the auditorium. Every detail. Every lie. My best friend Dave had sold me out, told people things I never even said, twisted every moment into something filthy. Jenny stopped making eye contact. Dave avoided me in the hallways. And Robbie? Robbie just smiled like he'd won something. So I disappeared. Not literally, but spiritually. I stopped speaking in class. I burned the songs I'd written. I ghosted Jenny. I threw my bass into the dumpster behind the music room and never looked back. And the thing is, no one came looking. No one asked if I was okay. No teacher pulled me aside. No friend noticed I was gone. I didn't exist to them anymore, and maybe I never really did. Years later, I'd wonder why it still hurt. Why, after building a life in LA, touring with bands, writing albums, signing autographs for strangers who sang my lyrics louder than I ever could, I still flinched when I thought about that gym, that laugh, that look in Jenny's eyes when she let it happen. You know, people talk about trauma like it's a punch. One clean blow and then healing. But it's not. It's a whisper you hear for decades, a song stuck on repeat in the corner of your mind. Did high school feel like a battlefield to you too? Who were you back then? The outcast, the golden boy, the ghost in the corner? Drop it in the comments. I bet you're not alone. Everyone thinks they know who they were in high school. But I found out I didn't even know who I was. Not really. I wasn't the freak. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't even just the quiet kid with a bass guitar. I was the match someone struck, then dropped, and left burning. There's a memory I've carried for so long it's turned into something heavier than it should be, like dragging a rusted-out bicycle behind you through the years because once someone told you it was the only thing that ever made you worth anything. That memory lives in a garage, 3 blocks from where I grew up, behind a cracked brick house with weeds taller than the fence and the faint smell of gasoline soaked into the concrete floor. That garage wasn't just a place, it was a world, and in that world, I wasn't some weird, pale kid who mumbled in the hallways and flinched when people laughed. In that garage, I had sound. I had rhythm. And, for a while, I had her. Jenny Thomas wasn't the kind of girl you wrote songs about because she already seemed like a song herself, messy, dreamy, too clever for the boys who only noticed her legs and not her eyes, too soft-spoken for the girls who ruled the cafeteria with eyeliner and cruelty. She existed on the edges, never fully part of any group, but always welcome in every circle, and that made her dangerous. Or maybe it made her brave. I still don't know. The first time she came over, she didn't knock. I was sitting on an amp, tuning a battered guitar I found at a garage sale for $20, when I heard the door creak and saw her silhouette framed by the golden hour sunlight like some scene out of a movie I wasn't supposed to be in. She stepped in slowly, like she was scared the magic might snap if she moved too fast. I didn't say a word. Neither did she. She just sat down on the floor, leaned back against the wall, and said, "Keep playing." So I did. It became a ritual after that. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, she'd show up around 4, always without warning, always pretending it was a coincidence that she had nothing better to do. She never asked questions, never judged the mess of cords and notebooks and half-empty soda cans that cluttered the place. Sometimes she'd hum while I played. Sometimes she'd write lyrics on scrap paper and slide them toward me without saying a word. I never told her how much that meant. I never told her how the silence between us felt fuller than any conversation I'd ever had. But the thing about quiet people is we store everything. Every smile, every brush of skin, every word you don't say, we remember it like gospel. And when that trust gets broken, it's not a snap. It's an earthquake. It was a Thursday night in April when it happened. I remember because the air smelled like cut grass and someone down the block was grilling, and the sunset painted the garage in blood orange light. Jenny had brought over a burned CD labeled "For Nate," smiley face, in her handwriting, and I was halfway through playing a riff she said reminded her of an Elliott Smith song when she asked if I was ever going to tell anyone about us. I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't want to, but because I did. So badly. But I knew what would happen. I knew how fast people in that school could twist something good into something gross, how they'd ruin it just for the hell of it. I knew how they'd look at me like I didn't belong, like she must have been slumming it or dared to feel something real for someone they'd already decided was beneath them. So I hesitated. And that hesitation, in her eyes, was betrayal. The next day, she wasn't in bio class. The day after, she passed me in the hallway and didn't even blink. And the Monday after that, Robbie cornered me during gym and said, "Heard you've been spending a lot of time in the garage with Jenny." His voice was syrupy, slow, like he was testing the temperature before boiling it. I said nothing. I was too stunned to breathe. Then he added, with that smirk I've never forgotten, "She tell you what else she does behind closed doors?" That was it. The rumors hit by lunchtime. Dirty, stupid lies I won't repeat. I never knew if she said anything to him or if he just guessed and got lucky. But something changed. Jenny disappeared from my world like she'd never been in it at all. I went to the garage that week, sat there for hours waiting for her, hoping maybe she'd walk in like always, pretend like none of it had happened. She never came. I called her once. Just once. Left a message that said, "I didn't tell anyone." I swear. She never called back. For years, I told myself she betrayed me. That she got scared and ran to Robbie for safety. That she chose the path of least resistance, popularity over truth, ease over honesty. But deep down, I always wondered, what if she didn't say a word? What if Robbie just sensed it, sniffed it out like the predator he was, and made her pay for being close to me? Because here's the thing I couldn't say out loud until much, much later. Maybe she didn't betray me. Maybe I betrayed her. Maybe that silence, that hesitation, that cowardice in the garage when she asked me to say her name out loud was the thing that broke her. And now, all these years later, I walk into that same gymnasium and see her face again, older, quieter, lined with something that looks a hell of a lot like regret, and I don't know if I should feel angry or ashamed. Last night, she walked past me at the reunion, paused for a breath, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Do I know you from somewhere?" Like we'd never sat cross-legged in a garage while I played her the only songs I ever wrote, just for her. Like the only place we existed was in my memory and nowhere else. Jenny looked me dead in the eye last night and said she doesn't remember a thing. Alana had never been to Ohio before, and honestly, she didn't want to be there now, which was something she made abundantly clear the second we landed at the airport that smelled like bleach and regret. She stood in the rental car lot holding her coffee like it personally offended her, squinting at a rusted-out pickup 2 rows down like it might cough at her or explode. "This place feels like someone pressed pause in 1998, she muttered, and I didn't disagree. I knew bringing her was a risk. Not because she couldn't handle herself. Alana could hold her own in a room full of music execs, drunks, or angry uncles, and she had more times than I could count, but because she was one of the few people alive who knew the whole story. Not just the public stuff, the interviews and tour stops and the pretty lie about how I found myself through the music, but the ugly, quiet truths underneath. She knew what the garage meant. She knew what happened to Jenny. And most of all, she knew exactly how much of my success was stitched together from pain I never fully processed. We were walking down Main Street when she stopped in front of the old record shop, closed now, windows boarded, graffiti curling along the bricks like vines, and said, "This where you bought your first bass strings?" I nodded. She didn't smile. She just stared through the plywood like she could still see the 16-year-old version of me fumbling with change at the counter, praying no one from school would walk in and see me buying music instead of beer or condoms or whatever it was guys like Robbie were supposed to be into. We walked in silence for a while after that, the kind that only exists between people who've already said everything important and are just waiting for the next storm to roll in. Eventually, we found ourselves standing in front of the old high school, which hadn't changed a bit. Same cracked steps. Same dead grass. Same air that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. "Why are we really here, Nate?" she asked finally, and I didn't answer right away, because the truth felt too stupid to say out loud. I came because I wanted them to see me. I came because I wanted to hurt them a little. I came because some part of me still thought closure was something you could buy, like a souvenir you picked up on the way out of hell. "You want me to leak it?" she asked, eyes still on the school. "Coachella? You know it'll go viral." blow up their little Facebook reunion group in about 5 minutes. She had her phone out already, thumb hovering like a threat. I shook my head. Not yet. She turned toward me slowly, voice low. So what's the plan, Nate? Walk around this dump in your fancy jacket until someone begs for a selfie? Wait for Jenny to break down crying in your arms so you can feel like the hero instead of the ghost. Her words weren't cruel, but they were sharp. That's what Alana did best, cut through the bullshit before it calcified into something permanent. I didn't answer because she already knew. Alana had met me when I was 24, fresh off a breakdown that looked like a road trip and felt like dying. She found me in a dive bar in Austin, playing to 7 people and a bartender who thought I was background noise, and afterward she said, "You write like someone who's trying to exorcise a demon but keeps missing." I told her I didn't know how to write any other way. She signed me 3 weeks later. That was 12 years ago. Since then, we'd been through 3 albums, 5 tours, and 1 canceled documentary that she shut down because it got too close to the old stuff. She knew the lyrics weren't metaphors. She knew the girl in the basement song wasn't a composite. She knew the reason I never sang the bridge live was because it still made my chest hurt to say her name out loud. So when she looked at me in that parking lot, eyes narrowed against the cold, and asked, "Are you still that kid?" I couldn't lie. I couldn't even pretend. Maybe I was. We drove back to the motel in silence, and she didn't turn on the radio. She never did when she knew I needed to think. Inside, I poured a drink that tasted like battery acid and stared out the window like I was waiting for a version of myself to come walking up the sidewalk and apologize for being such a damn wreck for so long. I asked her if I was a fraud. I said finally, voice low, barely audible over the hum of the heater. Alana didn't look up from her laptop. "You're not a fraud." I exhaled, but she wasn't done. "You're a coward." That one landed like a punch, not because it was unexpected, but because it was true. She didn't say it with hate or heat. Just a fact. Just a sentence that sat in the air between us like an unpaid debt. I'd built a career on writing the truth, but I hadn't lived it. I'd sung about forgiveness, pain, love, memory, but I hadn't forgiven. I hadn't even tried. I came back to this place thinking maybe I'd feel something crack open, some final note to a long, unfinished song. But all I felt was the same weight I'd been dragging for years. Heavier now. Louder. Alana closed her laptop and stood. "You want to do something real while we're here? Fine. Then stop performing. Stop being Nate Carter, the tragic indie darling with a haunted past. Be Nate Carter, the guy who never grew up and still thinks revenge will fill the hole." I didn't respond. I just stared at the wall, where a water stain looked vaguely like the state of Ohio, mocking me. She walked toward the door, but before she left, she paused. "You want to burn the place down?" she asked without turning around. I nodded once. "Then strike the damn match yourself." There are things you think you've buried so deep in the past they're basically fossils, things you convince yourself are gone, disintegrated, irrelevant, until something rises out of the dirt and says, "I never left." That's what finding the tape felt like digging through a pile of old boxes and uncovering a ticking bomb with your own name carved into the side. It was dusty, unlabeled, stuffed between stacks of yellowed yearbooks and boxes of forgotten trophies in my mother's basement. I hadn't even meant to find it. I was looking for a photo album to show Alana, something harmless and sentimental, maybe to prove to her that once upon a time, I didn't come from ghosts and ashes. I didn't even realize what I'd found at first. The case was blank, the kind you bought in bulk at Radio Shack back when people still gave a shit about rewinding. I almost tossed it aside, but something about the weight, the feel of it in my hand, stopped me. It was too familiar, too specific, like touching a scar you forgot was there. I took it back to the motel and popped it into an old combo TVCR unit the front desk kept behind the counter. The kind of thing they loaned out to travelers with kids or weird nostalgia issues. Alana wasn't there. She'd gone out to meet an old friend or maybe just to escape the suffocating weight of my silence. The screen flickered to life with that grainy, unstable look every VHS has, like the past itself is struggling to come through. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then static. Then a light bulb flared in some small room, a garage. My garage. It was me. And Jenny. Not doing anything wrong. Not in the way people mean when they whisper and smirk and spread stories like a virus. We were sitting cross-legged on the floor, backs against a wall covered in posters, a shitty desk lamp between us casting long shadows on the concrete. She was laughing. I was playing a riff I'd been working on, something quiet and bluesy. I remembered that night. I remembered the way her foot tapped along, how her lips curled when she tried not to smile too hard. She leaned over halfway through the song and kissed my cheek. I looked up, surprised, then kissed her back. It was innocent. It was private. It was ours. And someone had recorded it. That's when my hands started to shake. I didn't remember setting up a camera. I didn't even own one back then. My garage wasn't a movie set. It was a sanctuary. The only people who ever came in were me, Jenny, and on rare occasions Robbie, usually to mock or steal beers from the mini fridge I kept hidden under a blanket. A slow realization bloomed in my gut, bitter and sharp. Someone had been there. Someone had watched us. The video didn't last more than 10 minutes. But it didn't have to. When it ended, I sat there, staring at the blank screen, chest hollow, heart a punch-drunk thud against my ribs. Because now I understood everything. The laughs. The whispers. The way Jenny had changed, seemingly overnight, going from the girl who scribbled lyrics on my arm with a Sharpie to someone who couldn't even look me in the eye. She didn't betray me. She was humiliated. Someone a Robbie? Dave? Some friend of a friend who thought it would be funny had taken something real and turned it into currency. Had copied the tape, passed it around, maybe even shown it at some party while I sat in my bedroom wondering why everything good had turned to ash. I held that tape in my hand like it was a live grenade. What do you do with the proof of your own humiliation? Frame it? Burn it? Send it to every person who ever laughed behind your back and say, "Here, you forgot this?" When Alana came back, she found me still staring at the screen. I didn't speak. She didn't ask. She just looked at the tape, then at me, and said that it. I nodded once. She picked up the tape, turned it over in her hands like it was a sacred object, then sat down beside me and said nothing for a long time. Eventually, she broke the silence. "You want to release it?" I stared at her. "What?" She didn't flinch. "You want to leak it? Bury them the way they buried you. One little upload and the whole town remembers who the real villain was." I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. To watch them squirm. To force them to relive it the way I had to. But I didn't. Because revenge is messy. Revenge never lands the way you want it to. It doesn't feel clean or righteous. It feels hollow. Like taking a drink after years of sobriety and realizing it still doesn't fix anything. "No," I said finally. "Not like that." She nodded again. "Then what?" "I don't know. But not that." I still had to see Robbie. Still had to ask him straight to his smug face if he was the one who turned a secret into spectacle. Still had to look Jenny in the eyes and figure out whether she truly forgot or just pretended to because remembering hurt too damn much. The tape sat between us on the motel bed, quiet now, still, but loud in all the wrong places. It was proof. Not just of what happened, but of who I used to be. Of who I let myself be. And the worst part? Some small, shameful part of me still missed that boy in the garage. Because before it all fell apart, before the walls came down and the world turned ugly, he was happy. Just for a second. Just long enough to believe the past might stay buried forever. There's a special kind of tension that crawls under your skin when you sit down at a table where everyone's pretending nothing is broken, where the walls are covered in family photos and fake smiles. And the roast chicken is supposed to make you forget everything that ever made you want to scream. That's the kind of night it was at Robbie's house, an immaculate suburban box with a neatly trimmed lawn, a porch light shaped like a lantern, and two perfect kids who probably didn't know a damn thing about the man sitting at the head of the table. I wasn't invited, obviously. I didn't give a shit. I showed up anyway, wearing black like I always did, with a bottle of wine in my hand and a storm gathering behind my eyes. Robbie's wife opened the door, startled but polite, like she'd just seen a ghost and didn't want to offend it. "Nate," she said, blinking. "Well, this is a surprise." "Isn't it though?" I replied, stepping past her without waiting for permission. They were already seated. His aunt, our aunt, had made one of her famous casseroles, the kind with crushed potato chips baked on top like it was still 1989, and that counted as fine dining. Robbie looked up, fork midair, face stretching into that fake grin he always wore when he was about to lie. "Look who showed up," he said, leaning back in his chair like he was the king of some forgotten kingdom, and I was a wandering peasant finally crawling home. "Didn't think you'd want to hang with the old crowd." "I don't," I said, setting the wine on the table a little too hard. "But this isn't about catching up." His kids stared at me. Two boys, maybe 10 and 12, both with that same arrogant tilt to their mouths that made me want to wipe the smirk off Robbie's face just for passing it down like a goddamn heirloom. His wife tried to make small talk, bless her, but it evaporated the second I pulled the VHS tape from my coat pocket and laid it on the table like a loaded gun. "What's that?" Robbie asked, voice still playful but eyes narrowing. "You tell me." Silence. The kind that chokes. Our aunt shifted uncomfortably, her fork paused mid-slice through the casserole. "Now boys," she started, in that worn-down voice she used every time Robbie and I fought as kids. "Let's not turn this into something ugly." "It already is," I said, still looking at Robbie. "You know what this is, don't you?" He didn't answer right away. He glanced at the kids, at his wife, then back to me. His smirk faltered for just a second, barely enough for anyone else to see, but I saw it. I felt it. "I've seen a lot of tapes, Nate," he said, chuckling like it was some harmless joke. "You'll have to be more specific." "You showed it to people," I said, voice low, tight. "Back in high school. You passed it around. You made a joke out of something that wasn't yours." He leaned back again, arms crossed, the smirk returning like armor. "Are we really doing this? After 20 years? "Yes," I said. "Because I've spent 2 decades writing songs about ghosts I couldn't name. And now I finally know their faces." His wife looked confused. The kids looked bored. But the air between us was electric, waiting for someone to strike the match. Aunt Linda tried again, gently this time. "Nathaniel, honey, maybe we should talk about this." "No," I cut in. "You don't get to play peacemaker anymore. Not when you spent years brushing things under the rug just because Robbie was the good one. You all let him get away with murder as long as he smiled in church and said thank you at the dinner table." Robbie stood up, red-faced, the facade cracking. "You think you're better than us now," he snapped, louder than necessary. I stood too, calm but deadly. "No. I always was." His wife gasped. His kids went quiet. And I saw it in his eyes, the first flicker of something real. Not guilt. Not even fear. Just recognition. Like he'd finally realized I wasn't the same kid he used to push around. I wasn't the quiet boy in the corner of the prom, praying someone would just see me as more than a joke. "I loved her," I said, barely above a whisper. "You ruined her. You ruined both of us." "I didn't make you film it," he muttered. "I didn't," I snapped. "You did. That stopped everything." Aunt Linda's hand went to her mouth. His wife sat back in her chair like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Robbie just stood there, pale, mouth slightly open, unable to form words. "You broke into my garage," I continued. "You planted a camera. You waited for the moment. And then you used it. Because you couldn't stand that she chose me over you." He didn't deny it. He didn't admit it either. He just sat down slowly, looking down at his plate like maybe if he stared hard enough, the whole moment would rewind and start over. I left the tape on the table. walked out the front door into the cold night air that tasted like metal and finality. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't burn the house down. But I could have. And part of me still wants to, because some ghosts don't go away when you name them. They just stare back at you from across a table and dare you to finish what they started. By the time the final night of the reunion rolled around, the whole gymnasium smelled like cheap cologne, sugar sweat, and nostalgia thick enough to drown in. The kind that comes with crepe paper decorations and the desperate hope that a little music and alcohol can patch over the chasms time carved through everyone's life. The same DJ from the welcome banquet was back, spinning the same tired 90s tracks, except now the songs felt heavier, slower, like they were struggling to carry all the memories people had poured into them. I stood near the back wall for a long time, nursing a flat soda because I didn't trust myself with anything stronger. Not tonight. Not with the tape still fresh in my head. Not with Robbie's silence still echoing in my ears. Not with Jenny's eyes catching mine every time I glanced toward the dance floor. She was with a group of women I half recognized, the girls who used to rule the school from the cafeteria steps and the homecoming court. They laughed a little too loud, danced a little too hard, trying to prove to themselves they hadn't faded into the background of their own lives. Alana stood beside the bleachers, leaning against the wall with that casual stance that meant she was both bored and completely alert, scanning the room like she was assessing the damage of a party that hadn't ended yet. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she glanced at it, then at me. "You're trending," she said quietly. "Someone posted a picture of you from last night. Looks like it made its way to Reddit already. They're calling it the revenge glow-up." I didn't know whether to laugh or spit. Instead, I just shook my head and looked away, toward the stage where a cover band had been butchering pop-punk songs for the last hour. They weren't bad, exactly, they just weren't alive. They played like guys who'd given up on dreams long ago and were now just doing what they could to hold onto the echo of their youth. That's when someone from the crowd called out, "Hey, Nate, play us one of your sad boy hits." I turned slowly, eyes scanning the crowd. It was Dave. Of course it was Dave. He was holding a drink like it was a microphone and swaying just enough to be annoying. The crowd chuckled. A few turned to look at me expectantly, waiting to see what I'd do. Robbie was there, sitting near the punch bowl like he owned the place, staring at me with a look I couldn't quite read. And Jenny hadn't moved. But her eyes hadn't left me either. "Come on," someone else said. "Play something real. Not this cover crap." The band on stage looked confused, then a little annoyed, then resigned. They stepped aside, one of them gesturing toward the mic like he was handing over a weapon. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew the moment I stepped on that stage, something would change. There are things you can't take back once you say them out loud. I walked up slowly, my boots echoing across the floor, my hands suddenly cold despite the heat pressing down from the cheap stage lights. I picked up the guitar, just a borrowed one, nothing fancy, and strummed it once. The sound hummed through the speakers, raw and jagged, like a nerve exposed. "This one's called Basement Light," I said into the mic. I wrote it a long time ago, but I only just realized what it meant. No one spoke. No one laughed. So I played. The first verse came soft, almost whispered, lines about the scent of motor oil, the hum of a broken amp, the way two people can sit inches apart and still feel oceans between them. Then came the chorus, louder now, sharper. A confession disguised as melody. Lyrics about lies shared like currency, about ghosts that wear your friends' faces, about a tape that never should have existed. I didn't look at anyone as I sang. I couldn't. But I felt them. Felt their eyes. Felt their breath catch. Felt something shudder through the room like a breeze carrying dust and memories. My voice cracked on the bridge, a line about a kiss lit by a single bulb in a garage that used to be a sanctuary. I didn't care. I kept going. By the time the song ended, I couldn't hear anything but the ringing in my ears. No one clapped. They just stared. Like they were seeing me for the first time. Or maybe the last. Alana didn't move. Jenny blinked once, then looked down. Robbie's face had gone pale, his mouth slightly open, like he'd just realized the fire he started had finally come back to swallow him whole. I handed the guitar back and walked off the stage without a word. No bow, no smile. Because it wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. LA always looks better in the rearview mirror until you're standing in it again, bathed in that orange haze of smog-filtered sunlight and surrounded by 1,000 conversations you're not part of. The city doesn't care where you've been, how far you've come, or what ghosts you dragged back with you in your carry-on. It moves fast, it forgets fast, and if you're not careful, it'll turn you into a shadow of a version of a person you never really were in the first place. And yet, somehow, it still felt more like home than anything that Ohio ever offered me. The studio was empty when I walked in. Empty in the way that only expensive rooms can be: soundproofed silence, polished wood floors, a wall of guitars I'd used a dozen times but never once really felt connected to. There was a new track loaded up on the board, something Alana had sent over while I was still in the air, something she called radio ready, like that meant anything anymore. The lights were low. The coffee in the corner had gone cold. My luggage was still sitting unopened in the hallway outside the vocal booth. I hadn't even changed clothes since the show. I sat down in the producer's chair, leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and waited for anything, to feel different. Coachella had confirmed that morning. Alana told me on the drive from the airport, her voice tight with restrained triumph, like she'd been waiting years to drop that line, and now that it was real, she didn't know where to aim the satisfaction. She said I'd be the closing act on the second Saturday. That I'd be standing in front of 70,000 people who knew my name, who sang my songs, who thought they understood me because they streamed an album I wrote in the middle of a breakdown and played it on their way to work. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not now. Because the silence didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like a pause before the verdict. She'd left a stack of mail on the table beside the mixing board, fan letters, invoices, a couple of royalty checks that meant I could pay rent for the next year without even touching the next album. But on top of the pile was something else. Something quiet. Something small. A plain white envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just a single sheet of paper, folded once, tucked inside. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Jenny. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. There weren't pages of apology or questions or confessions. Just one sentence, scrawled in dark blue ink like it had been sitting inside her chest for 20 years and only just now found the courage to surface. I remembered everything. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just that. And I sat there for what felt like an entire lifetime staring at it, reading it again and again as if it might change, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something easier to swallow. But they didn't. They stayed exactly the same, clean and deliberate, a whisper louder than any scream. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sadness. I just felt heavy. Because memory is a weapon and a wound. Because once someone remembers, they can never pretend they didn't. And because I suddenly had no idea what to do with this truth now that it finally existed outside of me. Alana walked in, holding 2 coffees, her phone still buzzing in her back pocket like an alarm she refused to silence. They want a press photo by noon, she said without looking up, setting the cup on the desk. Something with a skyline. Or a sunset. Or your serious face. I nodded. She paused when she saw the letter. Her eyes moved from the paper to my face and back again. She remember? I nodded again. She exhaled, long and low. That change anything? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Because maybe revenge only matters when no one else notices. Maybe healing is just another word for forgetting how bad it hurt. Or maybe there's no healing. Maybe there's just the music and the noise and the crowd and the lights, and if you can drown out the silence long enough, it starts to sound like peace. The track on the mixing board was still waiting. A verse needed rewriting. A bridge needed more weight. A hook that didn't feel like a lie. I picked up the guitar, plucked a few notes, let them drift. Was the revenge enough? Did I finally feel seen? Or did the past win after all? They didn't clap at the reunion. They just stared. Like they were seeing me for the first time. Or maybe the last. And here, in the middle of everything I thought I wanted, in a studio lined with gold records and the promise of 1,000 voices screaming my name, I realized something else. They still didn't know me. None of them ever did. Not Robbie. Not Jenny. Not even Alana. And maybe that's the price you pay for being the one who got out. Maybe that's what it costs to become someone else. You bury who you were. And the world just keeps singing along.